For those that don't know, Congressman Aderholt is in his 12th term and proudly represents the 4th District of Alabama. He currently sits on the powerful House Appropriations Committee and is ranking member of the Commerce, Justice, and Science Subcommittee. The Congressman has been a strong advocate for our industry, and we look forward to continuing the relationship with his staff. And so thank you, Congressman, for taking the time, and I turn the floor over to you.
Thanks for having me on and having a chance to visit with you for a little bit. Right now, Congress is we're in a recess. We've been in recess for Memorial Day, and they've given us a little bit of extra time off. And so I've actually with my family today, and so I'm getting ready to, I'll be down for meetings in Alabama are scheduled all next week. But things in Washington, people always ask me what's going on and how things are going. And, my answer is it's sort of a crazy time right now in Washington. Quite honestly, a little bit different than I have been accustomed to. I think between the pandemic on one hand, then you had the election that was, of course, very divisive among the parties. That happened in November, and then of course you had the fallout that happened on January the 6th at the Capitol. All those things taken into the mix has really created a sort of a real volatile situation in Washington. Our schedules are not back to normal because of the pandemic. We're still doing a lot of work, just as we're doing here on Zoom calls. And we're not in our regular format of having meetings in the office. They are starting to open that back up, but it's under limited conditions. So a lot of folks are doing like you're doing and trying to set up these meetings through the Zoom. And quite honestly, it works well a lot. I mean, there's sometimes no substitute for person-to-person meetings, and I, of course, will always need that. I always have that, but quite honestly, these video conference calls are sometimes real handy to have sometimes when you trying to meet with people, and a lot of times when schedules doesn't work or when you have a pandemic like we've just seen. So I think this is something new for the future, and Congress is trying to figure out how to work through this. Congress has always sort of been face-to-face, and how we have our committee meetings and how we vote, and all that's changed as well through the pandemic. But I do think a lot of it will get back to normal as we start to see the decline and people get vaccinated. So it will be nice to get back a little bit more of a normal structure that we've normally used to. But right now, we've, of course, the House is controlled by the Democrats. As everyone knows, the Senate is a 50-50 split, but the Democrats control because of the vice president's vote in the Senate. So, but even though it is controlled in the House by the Democrats, it's a very slim margin, one of the slimmest margins in recent history that we've seen that either party has had. So quite honestly, it's down now to about 5 votes or 5 or 6 votes that differ between the Democrats and the Republicans. So it is more difficult for legislation to go through quickly. We had a vote just before we went into recess where the votes were almost 1 or 2 votes difference between the Republican and Democrat vote on one of the pieces of legislation that we had regarding the appropriations bill. So that's the way it is in the Senate as well. Of course, the Senate's a little bit different because of the filibuster. They've got the 60 vote threshold over there, so that makes things a little bit different. Even though the majority is controlled, Democrat majority controls, they still have to work around the filibuster. And of course, a lot of the things that Biden has been wanting to do has been held up because of that. It's a little bit easier to get it done in the House, but a little bit more difficult to get it done in the Senate because of the filibuster and the 60 vote threshold that you have to go forward to get legislation moving. In my committee, as Brett mentioned, I'm on the Appropriations Committee. Now I'm the ranking Republican on the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee. The Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee is the committee that funds the Department of Justice. Obviously, the Department of Commerce and then the sciences, the big part of that includes NASA. And so the NASA's funding comes through our committees. So right now, a lot of stuff going on with NASA, but obviously through Department of Commerce is always a busy time. And then, of course, with Department of Justice, it's a never-ending issue there because that includes the FBI, that includes the Attorney General, that includes the Bureau of Prisons. And so our responsibility is make sure we fund those departments for the upcoming fiscal year. And so we've been having hearings, as I mentioned, by Zoom over the last several months. And our next step is going into actually what we call marking up the bills. And that's where we pass the bills out of committee. And they're referred to as being marked up in committee because they'll mark through some aspects of what has been proposed by the president and change it. And we will then pass a full appropriation bills for all the different departments and agencies. That also has to be done in the Senate. So we're starting that process probably, or we will be starting this process the end of June. Hopefully, maybe get back in person when we do that, because it's difficult to have legislation where you're actually deciding the budget for, and sometimes they're billion-dollar budgets for a lot of these departments and agencies, and not being in the room together where you can discuss it as easily as you can. That prohibits you doing it from on a Zoom call. So I think that we will be doing that, and then those bills will go to the floor of the House, and we will pass those out. We have until September the 30th is the deadline. The new fiscal year starts October 1st, so we still have the summer to work on them. But as you know how quickly time passes, as we were just talking earlier, October 1st is going to be here before we know it. So it is, it'll get away with us if we're not careful. So that's sort of what I'm doing right now. I'd be interested in hearing any of the issues that y'all have that we could be aware of and that we could be on the lookout for, of how we could be helpful. So I'll just turn it back over to you, Brett, and let you go from there.
Yeah. Thank you, Congressman. And that was a great overview. I think a lot of our members, the big thing that's hitting the news is the infrastructure package, and just what exactly is in that infrastructure package. With the president publicly stating the whole corporate tax increase and on corporations and whatnot, it kind of keeps our members up at night. And so, with negotiations ongoing with Capito and the Senate and the potential of another bill being introduced or proposal out of Republicans in the Senate on Friday. I mean, what do you on the House side, what are you guys seeing or hearing on a potential bipartisan language? I mean, I know this could be, an infrastructure package could be pushed through reconciliation, but what do you, with your ears to the ground, what do you guys are hearing?
You're exactly right. As far as there's a lot of questions about the infrastructure bill, and quite honestly, I don't think anybody knows right now. I think I'm not even sure the president knows. I know the president knows what he would like to see. He wants a multi-trillion-dollar bill, but quite honestly, it looks like the 60 vote threshold in the Senate will keep that from happening. I don't know whether they have the votes in the House to pass that either. I think they're still trying to look for votes to pass it in either chamber. The problem you have, even though the Democrats are in control in the House, you do have a lot of Democrat members that have different ways that they want to see this infrastructure money spent. A lot of people see infrastructure as just on roads and bridges and highways and maybe even water systems and things like that. Other people see infrastructure as way bigger than that. It's something that would include almost anything that deals with infrastructure of the country. So that's going to be really the $64,000 question moving forward. You mentioned Senator Capito from the Senate has been the lead negotiator for the Senate on this, because really the House, I think, is waiting, and Biden as well, to see what happens on the Senate side. They're not going to move a bill forward until they know that they can get something through the Senate. I think if they can get through something through the Senate, then they can get something to the House. But even if they were to pass something to the House and it would be dead on arrival in the Senate, then of course Biden wants to see something happen, and I think he's willing to negotiate. I know he has come down on the initial numbers that he wanted to see for this infrastructure bill, but I understand that Senator Capito has recently met with the president, and they had some productive conversations. But she has been wanting to go back to the Senate to talk to her Republican colleagues about where to move forward on that. And so I think they're still not any closer than they were. I think they're still seeing what might be doable. But I think any infrastructure plan that you see, I think Republicans want to, number one, see it a lesser amount, preferably under $1 trillion, and also see a big emphasis on roads, highways, bridges, airports, what we think of as when we think of a highway infrastructure bill. The other issue you talk about is the tax, and I think that I was sitting noticing recently where there's been proposed floating of the inheritance tax, and even some Democrats are opposing that right now, that the Biden administration wants to do. So again, this is part of the give and take in this process. So I think that it's going to be difficult to get anything like that through reconciliation. I think they're going to have to go through the regular process. And even if they were to pass some of this by reconciliation, I think there would be lawsuits that would hold it up. So, they've already passed the one bill this year with reconciliation, which doesn't take a 60 vote, but just a majority vote. And they got that through, but getting additional legislation and trying to be creative opens up to, I think, a lot of lawsuits.
To your point, it's going to be a very interesting summer. Again, to your point, time flies. And so with appropriation season and the government shutdown and this potential large infrastructure package of how it's going to be put together, if it's going to be one large lump sum, if it's going to be broken up into separate bills, surface transportation, or reauth, what have you, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how everything unfolds. And then I guess, I know it's really early in the process, but again, to your point, time flies. So how does your 2022 look? Is anybody in the race yet, or how's everything looking for your?
I think people are right now looking at whatever race that they want to get involved politically. Really, the big race in Alabama is the Senate race that we have this year, or actually 2022. The primary will be just about a year from now. So that is the seat to replace Senator Shelby, who is retiring after several decades serving in the Senate. He was elected first in 1986 to the Senate. So his replacement is shaping up. I think you still may see some more candidates that jump in that race. Right now, as far as I understand, the two declared candidates, you have my colleague from the 5th District, Mo Brooks, and then of Linda Blanchard down in the Montgomery area, who served as Trump ambassador to Slovenia. Those are the two of the only one named that I have seen. There may be, I think, some others that are looking at it, but right now those are the two big names that we've seen surface. But of course, there will also be a race to replace Mo Brooks in the seat that he's vacating to run for the Senate up in the 5th Congressional District that includes Huntsville. So that's going to be very interesting to see who gets in that race. I know there's been 2 or 3 declared candidates that are in the race now. I know that the chairman of the county commission up in Madison County, Dale Strong, has announced his intentions to run and is aggressively running, but there's 2 or 3 others that I think are either have announced or looking at it. So needless to say, Mo Brooks has was elected about a decade ago. So he's been there 10 years. So it'll be the first opening in about 10 years for that seat. So there'll be a lot of interest in that seat. But my race has been pretty quiet, thankfully. It's always nice when my race is quiet. But you know, qualifying really won't be probably until probably at least the early part of 2022 when candidates actually have to file. So it's hard to know who is actually looking at running any of these congressional races and who will actually end up qualifying for even the Senate race. One thing that's good news for Alabama is that we were maintained our 7 congressional districts in the Congress. Alabama was under the threat that we could have lost to 6 seats because of the possible population decrease. Not so much in the state of Alabama decrease in population, but in order for us to maintain 7 seats, we have to maintain the national average with the population growth of the country. And that was where we were right on the bubble. And but we came through that. Looks like we're flying colors, and so Alabama is going to be able to maintain 7 congressional districts. So that's a positive thing for our state, and because you know having 7 seats, 7 members that are advocating for our state as opposed to only 6 is always a very positive thing, and always a good thing because we want as many people in Alabama that are advocating for our state as possible. So very encouraged about that.
Well, that's great to hear. I guess with that, we can kind of turn it over to those in attendance and see if anybody has any questions.
What about the possibility of passing a stop sale on open recalls?
I'll be honest with you, I have not heard what has been done on that. If you've got some background on that, please share it with me. What has been, are you hearing it? And I'll be on the lookout for what I can hear, but I'm not really hearing much about that right now. So I know it's not an issue that's really what they say is catching on fire right now. So it's not something I don't think that's of any real big concern, but any kind of background that you can give me that we can be on the lookout in that regard, I'd be happy to, be on the lookout for it.
We're hearing rumblings on the Senate side as Senate Commerce is marking up their surface transportation bill that a potential recall language is going to be introduced. We're not hearing much on the House side, so that's promising. But I'll be sure to pass along any information that I can to your staff just to be for their awareness.
On the House side, I've not heard anything about this. So again, it may be something the Senate is looking at, but I'm not. I don't know that it's gotten a lot of traction at this point.
What is going on with the CFPB? Again,
I have not really heard any updates as far as anything that's moving on that right now. That's always been an agency that bears watching, but right now there's been really no movement as far as anything different going on other than I've not seen anything to be alarmed about it other than just you always want to watch out what goes on there.
There is a quiet move by the Democrats to add 4 justices to the Supreme Court. What is the outlook and how will it affect Alabama?
Well, I don't see this going anywhere. As we all know, this has been discussed by the Democrats, but I get the feeling that the Democrats, there's a lot of Democrats that don't want to see this done. Right now, I think there was a backlash as far as the Republicans that Republican appointees, I should say, because obviously when you're on the Supreme Court, you don't go in as a Republican or a Democrat, but you're appointed by a Republican or Democrat president. The Republican president's having the most appointments right now, and conservatives controlling the court has been a lot of concern by a lot of Democrats. And so I think that's just reaction to try to somewhat make that more even. But the thing about it is you never know if you add 4 justices, when that will happen. There may be another Republican president that is in office by the time that actually gets passed. and you never know who's retiring. So it's always a situation where it's a roll of the dice. If you add more members, it could help Democrats, or it could hurt Democrats. As far as Alabama in particular, I don't think that it really will affect Alabama one way more than the other. I think that would be the same. But again, I really don't see that the appetite, even among the Democrats, for adding the 4 justices is really gaining any traction. And quite honestly, I've not heard anything about it lately.
What are your thoughts about eliminating the filibuster?
When Trump was president, he was proposing some things that I thought were some good ideas. And it was always very discouraging to see that it would fall on its flat on its face in the Senate because of the filibuster. Of course, being a Republican now with Biden in the White House, some of the things that he has been proposing from a Republican perspective, I don't mind them not gaining ground in the Senate. So having that filibuster is, probably, all things being equal, it's really it keeps one party from dominating over the other. So I'm hoping to see if we can keep the filibuster intact. There may be some changes of how they do the filibuster, and one of the things that they're talking about is maybe having where members actually go to the floor to actually filibuster. Right now, they just have to indicate that they are wanting to filibuster a bill, and they will hold the bill up. The old days, you'd had to actually go to the floor and actually debate the legislation and keep the floor busy to keep a filibuster going. So that might be something that they want to talk about changing. But as far as the filibuster overall, the 60 vote threshold, I right now, I'd be supportive, and I think it'll stand.
Is there any movement for a national CCPA legislation? If so, similar or different from California, since things are Democratic controlled?
I would put that in the category of some of the other, like the recall legislation. I've not heard any discussion about it. There may be something on the financial services where there's been some movement, but I don't see there's anything really going on the House side in that. So there may be some in the Democrat but again, because I think it would have a difficult time in the Senate because of filibuster, then the legislation maybe just holding off on the House side before they move forward.
The new Space Force based in Huntsville is coming under budget attack. How does this affect the expected growth in Huntsville?
I am still optimistic that the Space Force can move to Huntsville, but it's actually, I think there's a misconception out there by a lot of people of when this would happen. Trump, before he left office, the Trump administration decided that would be moved to Huntsville. It's in Colorado right now, just because that's where they set it up initially. But there was a search of all different places in the country during the Trump administration to find out where the best place to have the Space Force located. This advisory team that came forward recommended Huntsville, and that's still the plan to move it toward Huntsville. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people in Colorado that would like to see it stay in Colorado. So that's where you're getting a pushback from and the Biden administration to saying, we need to relook at this because we think there's other places. I think this opens up a can of worms because there were a lot of states that were in the running for this. And Huntsville, my understanding, was head and shoulders above the rest as far as the best location for it. So, but it's not going to be until the misconception, I think, is it's not until about 2 or 3 more years before it would move. And I can't remember the exact date offhand before Space Force would actually make the move. So it's going to be at least 2 or 3 more years before they actually make the move. So it won't be decided right away. There's still some environmental studies, I think, that needs to be done. But I'm still optimistic that Huntsville can get it. And as of right now, there's still the ones that are the chosen ones for the Space Force as of right now.
How is Alabama doing overall with unemployment? And what are your expectations about getting people back to work?
I think that the only problem that we're having right now in Alabama as far as the unemployment is a lot of folks that have not gone back to work because of the unemployment, additional employment checks that are the federal government is giving out. Of course, the governor has announced that she is going to be changing that, and that they will no longer get the match. And I think that takes place at the end of this month, and I'm not sure the exact date, but I think it's the end of this month. So I think that jobs are readily available. When I'm back in Alabama, I see signs consistently that people are trying to hire and having difficulty hiring people. So I think that once this unemployment benefit goes out of play, then we will be able to our unemployment will be in very low numbers.
What's your confidence level on taking back over the House in 2022?
Very optimistic that the Republicans can take over the House. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, there's only about 5 or 6 seats difference between the Democrats and Republicans right now. And anytime you have a presidential election year, that a new president comes into office, that following election, which will be this time in 2022, whatever party wins the White House loses seats in the House and the Senate. And so there is a very, chance it could either be between 15 and 35, and the numbers vary from every 2 years when they have, or every 4 years when they have this off-year election in the House and the Senate after a president just been elected. So, but whatever party's in the White House, be Democrat or Republican, usually they propose new things. A lot of people in the country don't like it, so they'll vote against the president's party, try to protest it, and so that's why you will sometimes lose as many as 30-something seats, maybe even more, but on average, it's between like 15 and 30 to 40 seats. So the Republicans only need to win about 5 or 6 seats to gain the majority. So if you use past history, then the Republicans should control after this next election.
Thank you, Congressman. I appreciate the time. I'm sure everybody on the call as well appreciates it. And 2022 is quickly around the corner, and hopefully things change for the better. But we appreciate the time. And if nobody else has any questions, I think we can end the event there.
Well, thanks for having me on, and please follow up with my staff on those issues that we discussed, and we'll be happy to help. And look forward to seeing you back on the Hill or in Alabama or wherever we meet.
Thank you, Brett. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please contact Brett Scott at NIADA. On behalf of Pastime GPS, NIADA, and Congressman Aderholt, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.